Hello, I am going to talk about Susan M. Schneider. She is a pretty busy lady. She um, she studied engineering and then she later got her PhD in psychology. She's taught at several colleges, including St. Olaf's, Auburn University, and Florida International University. And she's currently a visiting scholar at the University of the Pacific. And she's also a leading scientist at Root Solutions, which is an environmental collaboration in California that kind of uses behavioral principles. So I read two of her research articles, and she does have more, but one of them was by her and Morris back in 1992, and that was Sequences of Spaced Responses, Behavioral Units, and the Role of Contiguity. So previous research in this area suggested that responses could happen together and function as one behavioral unit to attain reinforcement and follow the matching law. And the matching law is kind of our model for how we make choices. So if it follows the matching law, then the rate of responding is proportional to the rate of reinforcement. So they went further in the study to look at these sequences, but also to look how delay of reinforcement affects responding and all the different responses in the sequence. So they used rats. They reinforced two response sequences and three response sequences, and they required a certain amount of time to pass between each response in the sequence. So they used a DRL, reinforcement schedule. The results were neither clear response or sequence matching, but the three sequence responses, and consequently more time until reinforcement at the end, caused less sequence coherence and less matching law coherence. In 2005, Schneider and Davison looked again at response sequences, but this time only two response sequences. So instead of looking at two responses in the sequence and three, they just did two. They used pigeons, and they found that the two response sequences did follow the matching law, and they did function as one behavioral unit. So they changed by changing the rate of reinforcement, affected both responses in the sequence equally. I also read part of her book, The Science of Consequences, How They Affect Genes, Change the Brain, and Impact Our World. Which so far has been interesting, and I think it's a great book for someone who's not well versed in the field, or not someone who's not quite all into behavior analysis and its theories, or a lot of other fields that go with it. That would be a good read. But she introduces consequences and reinforcement. Brief summary tells us the history of consequences and how they evolved from instincts and their importance in forming our development and our evolving as a species. So our ability to learn from consequences, or aka the environment, changes and shapes us daily, activating our genes here and there, forming our development as a human, and contributing to lasting genetic change. She discusses variety as a reinforcer. She says variety is intrinsically reinforcing for us, which may be related to variety as being essential to evolution. So she says we like variety and we also like new stimuli. Not always. Sometimes if we have too many choices, it doesn't go so well. We do like some control over what we do, or at least believing or having the illusion that we have some control. I also read two other journal articles that came before the book, and definitely are a precursor for everything in her book. So in her article, The Bigger Picture, Development, Genes, Evolution, and Behavior Analysis, that pretty much is what it sounds like. It's how all of these things work together and interact on our personal daily level and also on a generational level. So she introduces her developmental systems theory, which is a multidisciplinary approach to evolution and the nature-nurture discussion. She gives a few contributions from fields like developmental behavior analysis and epigenetics to show how environment starts working as soon as we are conceived, in utero, and on, and how the behaviors that it shapes lead to changes in our development and eventually evolution. In our other article, The Role of Development in Evolutionary Change, a View from Comparative Psychology, she goes into a little more detail about how our development is influenced by consequences, nurture, and genes, nature. She says it's not all about genetic mutations, which is what used to be the prevailing thinking. Our nature or our heredity is environmental in nature. We inherit how we are raised, we inherit where location we are raised, and the cellular environments around our genes. And that also goes for in utero, the embryonic environments. So in her book, she asserts that our ability to learn drives many developmental changes, some fleeting or some lasting over generations, depending on natural selection by the environment. So, in summary, she's given a broad view on behavior principles and their applications and their involvement with the other fields to answer important questions like nature, nurture, and evolution, and how behavior principles fit in with our everyday life. In her research, she has shown the complexity of behavior, especially in relation to different environments and in everyday situations in which reinforcement is often delayed. She has given a link between our behaviors in our own short lifetimes, our ontogeny, and the evolution of behaviors that came before us and that may come after us. If I were to interview her, here's a few questions. So, to her, you talk about the flexibility of instincts. They aren't as rigid as we think, and probably even developed from learned behaviors. What are one or two behaviors that you can see turning into instinctual behaviors in the future? Can you give some examples of response sequences in our everyday lives that function as single behavioral units? And do you think humans will ultimately be responsible for the future of our planet? If we destroy this planet, can we really be blamed, or do you think it may be inevitable? And here are my references. So I hope you enjoy. Please let me know what I could do better or any questions you may have. Thank you.